Here, moving from left to right, we have the sort of basic and first order distribution chain, which most of you, all of you, I'm sure, know from one sort of viewpoint or the other. Either you're actually selling in a farmer's market now, or you buy food at a farmer's market like I do. And this particular aspect really lends itself to things like fresh produce and fresh meat and so on, where you can get it quickly from the origin to the market stall on Saturday morning or whenever they run it. It's quite obvious, isn't it, that that's the most lucrative model that you can be in, because there are no middlemen whatsoever. And you are dealing directly with two people, not two different sort of aspects of the business model. You're dealing with not only the end user, the consumer, but you're dealing with a customer. They're one and the same. The end user actually gives you the money, writes you a check or gives you your credit card, and that transaction takes place at once. Whereas in the rest of these channels, there is an intermediary, or there is a consumer, an end user, the food buyer who takes it home and cooks it or whatever, or eats it in a restaurant, and then a retailer, which could be a food store, restaurant, cafeteria, whatever. So in that particular channel, the consumer and your customer are two different people, and we'll talk about that in a sec. So this second one, a good example, there are examples of this particular channel all over the place in BC, where someone loads 20 or 30 pounds of nuts into the back of their pickup truck and drives from Kelowna to Vancouver and delivers to 4 or 5 different small retailers. Not a very efficient way of doing things, but it happens all over the place, way too often. And then the third model, again, the distribution here gets wider. This particular model is very representative of the regional retail chains, much like Save-On Foods, Thrifties, those sorts of organizations, where you have a wholesaler now in the channel. And it could be the larger, there's sometimes a wholesaler, the wholesaler sits in a channel for smaller operations too, but they generally are found here. And of course the last one is the representative of a national food chain, a national restaurant chain, a province where we have, you may have food supply contracted for all of the hospitals or the correctional units and so on, where you have such large volumes and such wide distribution that you have now a broker in the act. That broker may sit between the producer and the final manufacturer if it's a packaged product, then through the wholesaler, retailer, and into the consumer's hands. So I hear complaints. You know, I hear both sides of the argument, and one of sort of the upsides of the farmer's market is that you keep all of the revenue. You have to pay expenses, of course, but it's all totally in your hands. Right? But on the other hand, there are a couple of severe downsides to dealing through farmers markets. It's labor intensive, isn't it? Labor intensive. Right? So what would you be doing if you weren't standing there at the farmer's market all day? Now, you don't have to, that's a rhetorical question. Yeah, you want to say, I'd be back producing more of the product. Now, I know you wouldn't, but that's the idea in this continuum of channels, As you build your business, the idea is to move wherever you start from upscale. As your production gets bigger and your distribution gets wider, your sales volume gets higher. Now, whether your profit margin as a percentage gets bigger or not is another story altogether. And let's be clear on this. I am not suggesting to you that you shouldn't be using farmers market distribution vehicles. They're great if that suits your particular lifestyle. It's your preference to do it that way. Just understand that if you're trying to build your business, if you're trying to be more than what you are right now, then you need to think about going upscale, because the farmers market method, while you keep all of the margin, as the lady in wherever said, you have to bear all of the costs, and it is really labor intensive. But it works like a charm. In fact, and farmers markets are just exploding all over the place. Now the next slide, you probably won't see this refresh real quick, but it's really to point out that the customer and the consumer, again, are two different people, except in the farmer's market model. The customer, and this is right out of sort of the MBA stuff, the customer definition is the person that pays you, the person that writes you a check or gives you their credit card. That's where the revenue flows from. The consumer, on the other hand, in your particular niche in agriculture, is the end user. So in that second one, of course, the consumer buys from the retailer in a store or a restaurant, and your customer in that case is the retailer or the restaurant. That's where you get paid. You don't get the consumer doesn't give you the money. So you see that distinction? And that's another reason, of course, obviously, that we talked about the farmer's market. So I want you to be clear in your mind that there are other than the farmer's market, there are two distinct people that you're dealing with. And when you're going to be doing consumer research, it's really critical that you actually gather information from both your customer and the end user. Some of you won't need to do that. Most of you will.